But anyway, welcome to this episode of the Further Insights podcast. Really excited to have my good friend, my very old friend, Mr. Jordan Goodman on today. Jordan has been in a variety of career roles and a variety of things over time, but it's kind of coalesced into one really interesting thing with still the ability for you to do the other. So I always just found that fascinating. So anyway, thanks for coming on, and I guess you can just kind of give us a 10,000 foot overview of who you are. That would be awesome.
Yeah, dude. Thanks for having me. It's always good to see you. I believe life improves when we feel more in rhythm with life itself. So whether that means feeling more connected to who we are, more connected to the people we're in relationship with, whether it's family, business, or otherwise, more in rhythm with our career and more meaningfully connected to the world more generally. That's what I'm about. I've always loved music and pro wrestling. So as I've continued both my career professionally, but also just artistic pursuits, I've tried to inch closer to those things that I've always been naturally attracted to. And I've been blessed up until this point to have really cool experiences within both, where the mission has remained the same, to help people feel more in rhythm with life itself.
Well, that's the best start we've had from a guest. Thank you for that. I mean, what is...
Top that, people!
Yeah, seriously, everybody stepped their game up. So what does that look like today? Like, kind of where are you at professionally? What are you doing now? And then I'd love to talk more about, how you got here. But
So I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor. That means I provide psychotherapy. So I do that daily from my couch on home, looking at my phone, working with my clients throughout the state of Maryland. I'm also a career coach, so helping others apply some of the tactics or the strategies or perhaps wisdom I've picked up along the way of trying to figure out how do I, whether I'm monetizing these things or not, how do I attract things into my future reality that I want to experience. You and I, we've been doing this for a very long time. I was just looking at your Baltimore drum kit that I haven't seen in maybe 20 years. And when we were children, what we wanted to do was get onto a stage, perform original music with our friends, and have an engaged audience, people that weren't there because we forced them to, people that wanted to invest their time and money into seeing what we had to offer on a stage. And you and I figured out how to do that as kids. And that was the best fucking internship of my life, being in a rock band and figuring out how do I take original songs in the basement and then get paying customers that want to buy a t-shirt and wear it to the mall or whatever. Mm-hmm. So yeah, now I do all kinds of shit. It's weird. I work
but
in...
it's that same concept of you want to accomplish something. You don't necessarily try to get too far ahead of yourself. Go and live it, understand it, and then move on to the next thing or keep doing more of that thing, whatever it is.
Sure.
Right? Yeah.
And a lot of really I think when I'm doing the coaching, I think of it in kind of two phases that we go back and forth between. There's the affirmation phase. A lot of people I work with, they don't have the beliefs that what they want is possible, that what they desire is permissible for whatever reason.
Or they don't deserve it.
That they don't deserve it.
Right.
They just may not have vision for what it is that they're interested in experiencing or achieving. So there's a lot of the affirmation piece. And then when vision gets a bit clearer, then we move into an activation piece where we're actually figuring out, okay, this is what you see in your mind's eye. How do we make that happen for ourselves? So that's a bit of the work that I do right now.
Is it all ages or a specific group?
Mostly, not very, some college trying to figure out more. Their parents have kind of gotten in touch with me and hey, kids in school, they're not quite sure. And I relate to that. I didn't know what the fuck I was going to do when it was at the end of undergrad and then at the end of grad school, because I just wanted to be a musician. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I figured out how to do that as a mental health professional. So a bit of that, late teens, early 20s, but mostly early to mid-career professionals, mm-hmm. people in their 30s, some in their 40s, has mm-hmm. been typical the past couple years now.
And it's just people that you know personally or have been referred to, or is it more your specific focus on music and your identity kind of just plays into the people that are looking for you?
Both. I mean, people that find me are often through referrals from people that know me, or me just being a bit louder online. I was much louder during lockdown because I spent 6 or 7 years mostly making a living doing drum circle group therapy in facilities. And March 2020, that shit went away.
Right.
And that was scary. And it was...
Virtual drum circles don't quite have the same appeal.
My colleagues are doing it. That was never my interest, especially with even like the slightest lag in time. But again, a lot of the power for me, what drew me to this type of work was being in a room with people, being in a circle with people. I'll get hired, for instance, I do a lot of work with a local synagogue. And when one of the rabbis asked if I would like co-facilitate with her, I was like, sure, but I'm only doing it if we're in a circle. If there's like, I don't want the hierarchy of we're physically above everyone and they're all facing us like in school. I want eye contact amongst everyone.
Sure.
My whole thing is create an equal playing field, whether it's a child and a secretary and a principal, or a CEO and a mid-level manager and an intern. My whole thing is people, and we're all the same, but yet we have differences, and those differences are often reflected in the instrument that they have or the rhythm that they'll play. But my goal, at least, and now we're kind of pivoted to another business that I have where I do drum circle facilitated groups for outcomes.
Beat well, right?
Beat well.
Yeah.
But it's not music for the sake of music or drumming for the sake of the drumming. Like, it's what I have. The service really has nothing to do with drumming. It has everything to do with the intended outcome, whether it's a wellness-related outcome or community or team building or stress reduction, something like that. But we all have differences, whether it's a different role or experience or personality or perspective. And when we can offer those differences for the betterment of the group, everyone succeeds. And me doing that virtually in 2020 was not interesting at all. What was interesting was working with people to help them get clearer on what they actually wanted and to help them, whether in support, more the tactical side, helping them figure out how to get what they want out of life. Here's another thing that I've done. I've done marketing at a high level in professional wrestling for a company from 2017 to 2019. And I had many roles there. Essentially, it was my responsibility to lead marketing, branding, and communications, which, as you know, that can touch everything in an organization. And that meant that there was many things I could be doing, and God bless them, they gave me plenty of rope to hang myself with. And so I got to experience hundreds of different responsibilities over those few years, and I realized what I enjoyed the most was working one-on-one with talent, helping them figure out what do they want to make happen within their role and supporting them in achieving that. And that was good information for me to pay attention to as I was trying to figure out, all right, we're in lockdown. Do I want to continue doing psychotherapy straight up, but now it's like one-on-one individually? Do I want to do more of that career coaching stuff? Do I want to work more in the music business from a marketing perspective, live events still? Do I want to work for a marketing agency? I had qualifications for all these things. And
sorry, everybody can hear my dogs upstairs. I doubt you can, but
we love the dogs upstairs. And so for me, it was a matter of like, let me explore all these things. Let me reach out to people who work in these fields and ask them questions and maybe see the ways in which they think I could bring value to those types of roles or organizations. And for me, it was, no, I really like working with people one-on-one and helping them figure out what works for them in life.
So it sounds to me like through the different areas you've worked in, from wrestling to therapy to music, it sounds like you're more of a facilitator in your mind. Like, it sounds like you figured out how to make things happen at a young age. You enjoy the practice of helping other people find that ability within themselves, and then continuing to do that. And it seems like that's really overall what you're doing. You're helping people become their full self, or become the best version of themselves for them, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. That's deeply gratifying. As I said, when we were younger, at least for me, I had no bigger dream than being on a stage in a rock band performing for an engaged audience. And I've been blessed to experience that hundreds of times and still get to. But I've also taught music for over a decade now, drums and guitar. And the first time I got to see one of my drum students that I started with when he was 6, and then by the time he's 16, he's performing at Baltimore Soundstage, like a legit fucking concert venue with real sound system. And seeing him do that felt like I was doing that. No different than one of the talent I was coaching at Ring of Honor, seeing them not only perform, but win a world title in a sold out Madison Square Garden. Like, I got to witness that from the perspective of a fan and feel that I won in a way too, because I was there to sit with them with the doubts and the fears and figuring out how to better position themselves and figure out how to better market themselves and how to leverage social media and how to leverage more traditional media appearances to put them in a position to hopefully get a spot on that card and then ultimately win a world title in their division in front of that audience. I'm not going to be a pro wrestler. I'm actually trained as one. When I was 14, 15 years old, I performed as one, which was a trip in and of itself. I realized that being a drummer hurt less and girls were way more interested in that. But I love wrestling, and by being a coach or a consultant or whatever role you want to call it, to someone like a pro wrestler or to someone like a musician, to see them succeed in the ways that make their dreams come true, that's a wonderful feeling for me to experience.
Mm-hmm. I mean, from the time you started your career as a musician in your teens through everything you've done to now, is it because you're that curious and that excited about all these other things that you've found yourself in, or are you just like not satisfied ever and you just need to keep going? Like, is there a part of you that relentless that you need to keep doing stuff to prove to yourself you can do it? Is it just you genuinely love these things and you've had this ability to make them all happen in a way that you need to you? Is there a conscious thought behind it? Like, how did you get, conceptually in your mind from I'm in a band to I'm going to be a therapist to I'm going to be a marketer in professional wrestling to do all of it simultaneously?
Right. Okay, so a lot of what you mentioned was true. I'll start with the last piece. So I went into mental health because it felt like a safer route. That was security for me. The music business, much like the pro wrestling business, is the Wild West. And when I was 21 years old and finishing the end of undergrad, like, I didn't see the music business, which by that point I had some degree of success and a really strong network. But I never saw that outside of being in a band as a career for myself for whatever reason. Psychology felt interesting to me. I'm someone who has worked with mental health professionals from a client perspective since I was a young age. So it was something that felt familiar and I felt an interest in. It was one of the classes where I wanted to engage in the conversations. That was good self-awareness for me to pay attention to at the time. And I applied to one grad school locally in Baltimore. I got accepted and it was like, okay, fuck it. I'm working like at a restaurant or at a mall, like doing retail. And okay, this program accepted me. This seems like a good next step in life. But that wasn't necessarily my dream. Everything changed for me my first year of grad school when I realized, oh, I can still be a musician here, and finding evidence-based research demonstrating all these significant healing effects that drumming, specifically group drumming, can offer the population. That's when everything changed as far as having a vision there. So really going into mental health, I'm very glad I did, because now I'm seeing all the different ways in which I can engage in the things that I love, like pro wrestling or music, from the perspective of a mental health professional. But to answer everything else you were talking about, as far as not feeling satisfied or trying to maybe continuously prove myself right, or being stimulated, all that is certainly true. But there's a balance in it. I'm not big on looking backwards. I still get recognized from a band that I was in 2006. This is 15 years ago now. Boy Crazy.
Yeah, that one got pretty big for a minute, huh?
That one worked.
Yeah.
That one fucking
guys
worked.
Touring and bands and emo kids in Florida, and I was like, what the fuck is going on? These guys are doing it.
That one worked incredibly well. I learned a lot from it. And I still use a lot of those experiences, what I've learned, how I grew as a person when I was, at the time, 19, 20 years old. I still apply a lot of that to what I'm doing now. We could maybe talk about that a bit more, because I see a lot of my contemporaries not doing that, using the stuff that they picked up along the way, because they felt the band ended and then the whole experience was a failure or whatever.
Over, and they just put their guitar away, never touch it again, and that's the end of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I actually worked with a coaching client for a year who went way further than I. I mean, this dude was supporting like fucking Fall Out Boy like in Europe arena tours, and then still did not see the value in those experiences as he transitioned in his career. But again, I'm not necessarily big on looking backwards. I appreciate everything I've done. I'm very encouraged by everything I've done. But yeah, there's a part of me that wants to keep like doing it again in whatever way that is. So whether that's a certain podcast that I'm a part of, or okay, let me try to get a big boy job in pro wrestling. Okay, now let me try to do something different in pro wrestling. Okay, let me do a drum circle program for at a conference. Okay, let me try to now do a keynote at a psychology conference doing this thing. So yeah, there's a part of me that's always like, what else can I do? Sure. And really, I think it comes down to what else can I get away with?
Right. That's it.
Because for me, I'm very rooted in being oppositional. In the words of Seth Godin, like making a ruckus. I look around the world often, and this is ever since I've been young, and it really started with like the HF festivals. So for those who don't know, this is the HFS, the biggest East Coast alt rock station in the 90s. They had these stadium shows annually. 60, 70,000 people would come.
Those are still some of the best concerts I've ever been to.
And so I started going to those in 7th grade. And when I went to a show like that and saw how free people felt, how happy people seemed, how expressive everyone was, I was like, this is different than when I'm in school. The feeling of the people here, this is different than when I'm at the mall or eating at like fucking TGI Fridays. I was like, this feels better. This feels like a more elevated human experience. And it was like, why is the norm or the typical so not interesting? Why are so many people like not that engaged? And so for me, that was like always the thing. Like if maybe I shouldn't trust what's normal in society, because if you look at whether it's anxiety or depression statistics, marriage statistics, whatever it may be, like there's a lot of people that aren't thrilled with the state of their life. And for me, it was like, maybe I don't need to conform. Maybe going the route that a lot of the people I came up with, where it was very traditional as far as education and how relationships ended up, I was like, maybe, even though there's a lot of social pressure, certainly, with those things involved, I don't necessarily see people, like, in general, being, like, super stoked about that. So I think from a very early age, and I certainly I probably get a good amount from my dad, too, in his own way, it's just like, fuck that. Let me do my own thing. Let me like, there are no rules as long as I'm not hurting anyone. There are no rules with what we can do, whether it's how we live our personal lives or career or otherwise. And so I think that is a big part of it for me. Like, what can I get away with next? But obviously for me, and I'm a shit disturber, clearly. I like to have fun and troll, but it's in good spirits. But from a professional perspective, it's like, what can I get away with? But obviously, it needs to do good. It needs to be of value. It needs to serve a certain audience or market because it's career and the goal is to make money and get another opportunity to do that thing again.
No, it's interesting. While we were talking, it's just such an interesting dichotomy between proving people want something, like proving market demand for something as an indication that you should do it, versus this burning desire that you need to do the thing. And there is a middle ground. I think you are the middle ground, right? You found that balance between complete chaos and personal development and just doing whatever you want to do within reason and, the bounds of moral human life, and, the need to make money, to have family,
survival,
to live, to pay for your life. How do you – the thing has to make sense, but – some of the craziest, most important things have happened on this side and gotten here, and some of the worst things, but most successful things have happened over. So it's this cultural divide, I think, that we're finding, or this human being kind of philosophical thought process we're having now between what do I need to do, what do I want to do, and there is something in the middle for everyone across all socioeconomic boundaries. It's not like a privilege or money thing. And I think a lot of people would say, well, you're privileged to have the choice to do what you want to do. And to some extent, that is true in general. But even within the constructs of whatever situation you're in, how do you become the full version of yourself in a way that is beneficial to others and healthy and good? It's hard. People really struggle with it, and it doesn't have to be that hard, but maybe it just is. Maybe it just is. I mean, if you don't have the ability and the time and space that we did as kids, where you have parents who take care of you and a family takes care of you and provides a roof over your head, resources, education, and have friends that push you and motivate you to try, like, maybe that really isn't possible for everybody. But the more that I, talk about this kind of stuff and the more people I engage with, the more people I meet, I think it's more possible than people realize. And I think that thing you talked about in helping your clients understand, like, how to accomplish the things they think they can't, that's really what I'm interested in business and life. Like, how do we help people find their power without turning them into complete monsters? So I don't know, it's a lot to chew on, but that's kind of my general kind of feedback what you're saying. Like, how do we help people find that middle ground between those two things?
Yeah, and for a lot of people that I work with, they may be in a position where they are really not happy with, like, their current job, let's say, and they're like, I just want to find the next thing. Where I'm like, well, wait up. Maybe quitting the thing right now isn't the best. Because now, obviously, we'll talk about it, and maybe for their sake of well-being, maybe it is. But patience is underrated. Mm-hmm. Like, I've accomplished some of the things I've accomplished in life because I chipped away for 10 plus years at it. And I was patient. I tried to offer as much value as I could without asking for anything in return, whether it was a job or an opportunity or a sale or whatever it may be. But it also starts with vision. So it's a matter of, some people just may be unhappy or feel stuck or stagnant, but they don't even know what it is they're looking for. A lot of people don't even know what they value.
100%.
They don't know what will make them happy.
Yeah, I'll say, like, some people say, like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know what I should do. I say, well, what do you want? And if you can't answer what do you want, you can't look in the mirror and say, how bad do I want it? How do I accomplish it? That's, like, such a fundamental thing. And a lot of people really don't know that. They don't know that, and that's where, there's a lot of ways to have self-discovery and find what your tribe is, so to speak. But a lot of people, it seems like, just don't. That should be there. That have the opportunity in their life to be the full version of themselves, like, either because they're scared or they're worried or they don't care or they haven't been encouraged to try. Like, they don't even know what they want. And that's a difficult place to be, I think. But for some people, it's funny. I say that, and then a lot of people will be like, no, I'm pretty content with it. I don't need to know. And I'm in the present. Mindfulness is tricky like that because you don't want to plan. You don't want to go backwards, but, like, you want to live in the now. And some people are really just okay with that and just want to live. And I encourage that too. But I mean, in terms of entrepreneurship, business development, doing kick-ass things in your life and making things happen, like if you don't really have a sense of what you want to do, then your ability to make it happen, it's just impossible. A lot of people are just like, I want money. That's not the thing. It's
I don't like. I mean, yes, we all need a baseline level of money to literally survive and to maintain some sort of lifestyle that works for us. But I know the times I've succeeded biggest, whether it was that band Boy Crazy, or I worked, the wrestling company was called Ring of Honor that I worked for, starting in 2017. Like the times I think of those two things as, if I can lift this, where I kind of succeeded the most or was most successful. And a lot of people would be like to me, oh, well, your Be Well business really worked. You figured out how to credibly be a mental health professional while still being a drummer. And yeah, that's true. But the difference between those things is that a lot of the motivation to build Beat Well was fear-based. The fear I was trying to avoid was becoming a licensed mental health professional and just doing the typical existence of that. That scared the fuck out of me, dude. And so I worked as hard as I could to put myself in position, doing gigs for well over a year for free. Again, whatever I could, like trying to get as much media, build network around me, write articles, and ask for no money in return for local websites just to like gain traction. A lot of that was the avoidance of an undesirable future. Mm-hmm. It worked, but there was way more friction along the way. With the particular band or working for this particular wrestling company, there was nothing more.
Cool. Sure.
For that particular band or that particular wrestling company, there was nothing more in life that I desired more than experiencing what I experienced with those projects. Mm-hmm. And so that wasn't fear-based. I mean, that was, if you'd be kind of like simplistic about it, like that was love. That was pure desire. And there was way less friction in me doing the work. I did a lot of stuff for that band, and I did stuff for almost a couple years before I even asked for an opportunity to work with that wrestling company, where I was investing time, I was investing energy, I was investing money without any guarantee that any of it would work out. But I was motivated out of pure desire. If I was just trying to make money, there is no way in hell that I would have had that type of motivation and dedication to try to accomplish those things. Mm-hmm. We all need money, yes. But if that is the only motivation, like, one, you don't take that to your grave. How much is enough? That can be a trap to fall into. Because if that's the only metric that you are like either chasing or determining success or self-worth around, then like, it's not like, I know people worth hundreds of millions of dollars that are not happy. And I've grown up around people with far less money, but still more than they'd ever need. They're not happy. And so that was helpful for me to see that, I guess, growing up and realizing like, if that's all that there is, it's like a hollow existence. But like, what makes you feel alive? What makes you feel like you? I don't know if money's the answer for that as an identity. And certainly if you're looking for some sort of motivation to really put in the work, to chip away at a vision, you need something that comes from within. Mm-hmm. You know, like I said, ever since I was 4 or 5 years old, I've naturally been attracted to music and pro wrestling. A friend didn't suggest that. A parent or a teacher didn't suggest that. The president at the time didn't suggest that. I was just naturally attracted to these things. So when, even as I grew older, and I still think about this, when my responsibilities are done for the day, what am I attracted to? What am I Googling? What am I talking with friends about? What am I in some message board reading about? What am I watching on TV, or what am I listening to a podcast about? Like, what am I attracted to in life? That's a really good place to start
Mm-hmm.
when we're trying to answer the question, like, what do I want?
Mm-hmm.
What am I passionate about? What lights me up? And it took me a while to come back around to the pro wrestling thing because there's certainly negative connotations with that culturally in society.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly when I was really considering it from a career perspective, I had to wrestle with this idea of, what's my mom going to think? I'm this like licensed therapist who's now going to say, hey mom, I'm still going to do that, but like once a week, but now I'm going to be a marketing professional for a wrestling company. And God bless her, I told her that I had that fear of judgment, and she told me as long as I'm like taking care of myself, then she just wants me to be happy. Like, dude, I like bawled when she told me that. And I didn't realize I held on to so much of this story in my head about what she and others might like think about me for making this type of change. But so that, again, back to the coaching I do, a lot of it is this affirmation piece initially, because it's giving ourselves permission to own the things that make us who we are, to like give ourselves permission to enjoy the things that we're naturally attracted to. Whether that is more math-based or pro wrestling or dentistry or like fucking rugs. We all like what we like, and we don't need to analyze why that is. But again, if it gives us a sense of enjoyment or identity or meaning, and it's not harmful to ourselves or others, then like anything's on the table, in my opinion. Now we live with the internet, and like this, we can reach billions of people at the most massive of scale with relatively no financial investment to do so. And like there's so much abundance, I guess is what I'm getting to. Like whatever you're into, there's enough people into that around the world where you can figure out a way to provide value for those people, and maybe they throw you a couple bucks in return.
No, it's interesting. I think that's the enlightenment we're experiencing now as a species. Like human beings deserve better than what they're told they should have, or what they think somebody else thinks they should have, and that weight everybody carries of who they should be based on somebody else's viewpoint, or what they should do based on somebody else judging them for doing something or not. It prevents everything, and it has prevented people from creating and innovating and loving and sharing. And it's that moment is here because of the internet, because of our ability to learn and share and see things. You know, like people, you know, you're just told it's the way it is, and that's what you do. And that was how it was and remains for many people. But I think with therapy, with mental health, with people like yourself sharing your perspective about how you're finding that thing, I think it's the most amazing gift that we have right now. But that's the whole thing with the universe, right? The less we worry about exactly what we're going to do, and the more we just lean into that interest or that desire or that attraction we have to the thing, that what do I want to do thing, it becomes that light bulb happens because you're in that open mindset, and you're willing to, you know, you're putting yourself out there, and then the universe literally, like, it gives it back. People, it's a give and take, and it's a reciprocal thing. It's really been amazing because I've experienced a similar thing myself, where, you know, I put a lot of other people's expectations of me on myself and didn't really do what I really wanted to do at the end of the day, but I didn't know exactly how to do it, what to do. I knew why I wanted to, but like that leap it's scary for a lot of people. So, you know, I think it's just what you're doing. I think we need to help people find that passion, because a lot of people are literally, you know, they're separated from it. So
yeah,
I just
and
think it's an interesting thing.
For some people, the passion, once like they're actually honest and introspective about it, it may lie in the stability.
Right.
It may lie in, I don't need to love my job, but it's secure.
Right.
And it pays well.
Right. If somebody says, what do you want? You say, I just want to stay home and watch Netflix. That's great. If that's what they want. Not everybody has to go be, you know, a Renaissance man entrepreneur, but
no, it's fucking hard.
Right.
It's scary.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of work. You know, when I worked for the wrestling company, that's actually the only time I've ever had a salary. That's the only time I ever like really had like a 401k and insurance paid for me, or vacation time. For like a couple years of my life, that's the only time I could not work and still know what I was going to make. Most of my career has been, if I'm sick, or if I go away and don't work, I ain't making money.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally appreciate the security in a more traditional type of job role and setup. It's really nice. But for me, one, like, I like being the leader. I want to invest in my vision instead of someone else's vision and making them rich. But I'm also an artist, and I guess I'm maybe more comfortable with ambiguity or not knowing an outcome or kind of seeing what might be in between the black and white. And I also want to be responsible for, I don't know, the future of my life, what will become of my life. And so more of a entrepreneurial route or a gig worker or freelancer or independent contractor route, which is what I do with the mental health work that I do. I think with the practice I work with, I'm the only non-employee right now. But I prefer that. Like, that works for me, but I have that self-awareness. Mm-hmm. And I think the key, at least in the conversation we're kind of circling right now, is more about having the self-awareness of what's best for us. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would never, like, try to convince someone that being an artist or being an innovator or being their own boss is the best way, because I don't fucking know the other person. But I know for me, this is what works for me right now. And maybe in 5 years, I'll have a totally different perspective about what works for me, because life will be different. Mm-hmm. I didn't expect a pandemic, and I'm open-minded and I'm human. So I will change and evolve. And I guess the punchline is that I'm continuously checking in with myself. I have my own practices and my own relationships in life where I am exploring these things to get a better sense of where am I, how am I doing, and what is working for me. And just as importantly, what's not working for me, and what can I do about that?
Mm-hmm. What do you think connects drumming to your practice as a psychologist to what you're doing in marketing? Like, are there universal rules that you think apply across the board?
Great question. So if I go to a wedding and I'm sitting next to someone that I've never met, they'll typically ask, so what do you do? That's a hard question for me to ask. That's why I typically start with how I started this conversation. I lead with what I believe, and that kind of vision or mission statement influences all the different behaviors that I do in the world to make money or create art. Yes, for me, rhythm is a universal principle, both literally, whether we're talking about the rhythm in this conversation, celestial rhythms at a macro level, micro rhythms, what's happening within the individual cells of our bodies, more like seasonal rhythms. Like, rhythm is a universal principle of life. But also, rhythm is a universal metaphor for how I perceive the world, my life as a whole, the trajectory of my career, or otherwise. And so I'm interested, again, I specifically use the terminology of like being more in rhythm with myself, people, career, and the world. So I'm always thinking or feeling in those terms. It's one of the blessings I've kind of picked up, I believe, as a drummer. But also like this idea of, I don't know, it's I'm glad you asked me this. I've not been asked this like often. When I'm marketing, I'm trying to be in rhythm with the brand and the consumer, the brand and the fan, the brand and the market, whatever. I'm looking for like what can I do to make these factors more in rhythm with each other. When I'm offering psychotherapy or a coaching service, I'm trying to get a sense of being in rhythm with who they are, where they are in the moment, where they're trying to go. I'm trying to get a sense of like how in rhythm or not are we. When I'm hosting a podcast, I've hosted a few different podcasts, in the past decade. Whether that's me thinking, who is this conversation for? Who is the target listener? How can I get in rhythm with them? And really what I'm just talking about is marketing principles. But it's like the questions I ask the guest or the conversations or topics that I bring up in the conversation, is this in rhythm with who I'm trying to connect with right now? So I'm always thinking in terms of rhythm from that perspective too, both what's within me, but also what I'm trying to make happen in the world, whether it has anything to do with me or not. When I was doing marketing for a pro wrestling company, that shit had nothing to do with me. That was very different than me performing on stage, or very different from me hosting a podcast, or me being a therapist for someone. I was an instrument kind of pulling the levers behind the scenes for a wrestling promotion to connect with the world. But again, even though it had nothing to do with me, I'm still thinking in terms of rhythm. One of the things why I love pro wrestling so much, and very similar to music, so I'd imagine you could appreciate it, like even just a show. So, okay, we have a live event. What's the rhythm of that event? What is the match order? No different than what's the set list. So we want to like start off with a fucking banger, and we also want to end in a way that leaves people feeling better and motivated to come back the next time. So even like from that perspective, there's a rhythmic quality to those things. Mm-hmm. And when a big event goes on sale, like, all right, I'm going to take the temperature of the company, the fan base, pro wrestling more generally, the world more generally, and get a sense of like, okay, like where is the wave? I don't surf, and I don't really know surfers personally, but I have a sense of like what that might be like, because most is out of our control. Mm-hmm. Just like the ocean at any given moment is out of their control. But how in rhythm are they with the water and with themselves and with the board and with the wind and all these different factors? Like how in rhythm are they with all of that? How can they take in all of that information and make a well-informed decision on when to ride and at what angle and with how much weight leaning toward what side and in what direction, all these different things. To me, like, this is all rhythmic in nature. It's like trying to become more in rhythm with like whatever life presents to us in the moment, and especially given what type of future outcome we're trying to achieve.
No, I'm so glad we're talking about this, and it's interesting because like as a drummer, rhythm, feel, they're connected to me, right? And I think being able to feel what's going on and adjust in real time to get in a good flow state, to get into a rhythm, it takes a lot of trial and error and patience to understand what feel means to a person and how they can even get in rhythm. So I'm curious about that from like a more of a educational perspective, or as a teacher, music teacher. Like people often will tell me I don't have rhythm, and I just like anyone can do anything if they work hard enough. Like it does, and some things do come more naturally to some people. But like for somebody that says they don't have rhythm, as a metaphor, as a basic drumming principle or musical principle, kind of in the same context, if you can combine them, like what is rhythm for somebody that doesn't think they have it or doesn't believe that they are capable of feeling the situation, right? They need this type A rigid curriculum, or there's nothing. Like, how can people find that if they don't have it?
Great question. And I hear that all the time. Because not only music teachers, I'm sure, hear that because their students are trying to develop a sense of musical rhythm. But I'm someone who has chosen a career path that literally puts instruments into non-musicians' hands. Someone that works at a company, someone that's in a group therapy, someone that just goes to a school, or someone that just showed up for the community event. Most people in our culture don't think of themselves as musicians because most of their musical experiences, where they are the musician, started typically at a young age and typically in a class or a lesson where they are told to perform in a specific way. And if they don't do it that way, then it's invalid or they're wrong. And that's not a fun or interesting way to get a lot of people comfortable or excited or engaged about like their own musicality. I believe we're all natural-born musicians. I believe we all have a natural rhythmic quality to us. We have a heartbeat. Like I've led successful drum or musical experiences, improvised, mind you, with people that are with active psychosis, people that are blind, with people that don't have fingers, people that can't hear, people that are infants and elderly. Like, all those people had a heartbeat, and the term is literally within it. So we're all rhythmic. In my definition, we're all natural-born musicians. So I think a lot of it starts with just that. Again, the affirmation phase.
Sure.
What are our beliefs about who we are and what our potential is? But yes, there are great drummers and there are shit drummers too. And so some people may have more of a natural inclination to what you and I as drummers would consider like better feel, for instance.
Because you can play the same thing and it can sound entirely different if somebody's uptight and rigid in their feel versus somebody who's laid back and loose. You know, that is a very clear distinction between if somebody's feeling it or not. And that's the barrier to breakthrough, is to not feel it or to not overthink, so that it just feels natural to you. And people really, I think, struggle with that in general.
Of course, and I'll answer the question, but I'll also say the validity or the one's enjoyment of someone's feel, that's also subjective.
Sure.
So a lot of people would say Meg White, the drummer of the White Stripes, is a terrible drummer. She's too simplistic.
Put her in the bucket with Ringo, right?
Yeah, her time is a mess. Whatever. I dare the best drummer on paper to match her feel.
Right. Absolutely.
That's like trying to say, like, well, have the same fingerprint as that person. If you're perceptive enough to like pick up on the differences of someone's feel. If I'm teaching someone, if I'm trying to help them develop that, I start with the body. Mm-hmm. I get their body to literally move with the music. A lot of people, like maybe if someone who doesn't have a good feel, often you describe them as being stiff. Mm-hmm. And they're rigid in their physicality, and thus the rhythmic quality of, or the feel of the music that they're expressing can feel that way too. Music, like most other things in life, that need to flow. Again, I did not grow up doing any sort of martial art, but I know that a lot of the wisdom of martial arts is this concept of flow, of using like what's within them and what's around them, like manipulating or facilitating what's there in a way that feels more flow or effortless or whatever it may be. So I try to get people to move, whether that's nodding their head, rocking their bodies. I'm literally trying to get them to physically feel what they're doing. Because, like, what's the music the sounds, okay, you got a stick of wood hitting, like, this drum head that's surrounded or connected to wood. Like, that's the sound, but what's the music? And the music is all within the person. Mm-hmm. That's the feel, that's the expression, that's the musicality, etc. So for me, it's all about trying to get people to have better access to themselves. Mm-hmm. And that is no different than the work I do in psychotherapy. It's no different than the work I do as a career coach. It's no different than the work I do in a drum circle environment. And it's no different than the work that I do when I'm marketing to any community of people. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to create more humanity. I'm trying to get people more rooted in who they are. I want them to feel something, and all feelings start from within.
It exists in nature. We just have to allow ourselves to hear it or feel it, right? Is that essentially the advice for people? Like, just be open to your natural state? Or is it something that people have to consciously, like, seek?
Both.
Yeah.
Both. Yeah, again.
I think about the breathing exercise, like, people just, like, breathe for 7 seconds, right? And, like, yoga, meditation for people that really are not anywhere even close to wanting to play music or even care about that, but, like, this sense of rhythm in their life or balance in their life, like just breathing sometimes for people can really just get them to center and get them to realize who they are for 5 seconds without the noise that's constantly coming into our ears?
I'm still a young pup. I just turned 37, but I've done a good amount of stuff, and I've done a lot within like the mental health or self-improvement space as a professional and a practitioner as well. Like I do this shit, and I've done it long before I made $1 doing it. And like that's why I believe it's meaningful and I'm good at it. But out of everything that I've learned and experienced, if someone were to ask me like, what's one piece of advice you could give me for like a better life or to be more successful or happier or whatever, I would encourage them to learn how to breathe. Simple.
Yep.
But without question. The state of our breath determines the quality of our state of being. I'll say that again. The state or the quality of our breath determines the state or the quality of our being in that moment. When you're anxious, like the breath is different than when you're confident and at ease. When you're anxious, the breath is more like up here. It's more rapid. It's less controlled. When we're confident and we're feeling secure and we're feeling like good, the breath typically is going to be more elongated. The breath is going to travel down, closer to the diaphragm. And that is something we can control. So I know for me, especially if I'm feeling overwhelmed or nervous about something, if I'm going to go to a keynote at a professional conference, I can expect I'm going to feel a bit more overwhelmed than if I'm fucking laying in my bed, watching TV. If I'm going to go on, when I used to go on first dates, I would feel more energy that felt a bit not grounded than if I were to like be playing a video game with a dear friend. So I know that I may not be able to quote unquote control the feelings, but if I control the quality of my breath, if I actually take some time, do some belly breathing or diaphragmatic breathing, if I slow that down, then that is sending signals emotionally, cognitively, otherwise, that I'm safe and that these other parts that I experience as me, like those things have permission to calm as well. So like everything starts with the breath. And that's something, whether we're conscious of it or not, will always be there. And when it's no longer there, like, then that's it as far as what we know this to be right now. Like the breath is everything. And oftentimes it's the most simple stuff that is the most powerful, that contains the most wisdom.
I love
like
that.
Fucking breathing. Like that's the whole game.
It's such a practical starting point for somebody that's like looking for ways to get more in rhythm or more in tune with themselves to figure out how to achieve their goals that they might not even know, but like just breathe.
And it's hidden in plain view because it's so obvious that it's so easy to miss. Also, we have a culture, a society that doesn't respect the breath enough. So it's a social thing too. But yeah, like that's the whole thing.
I love that. What haven't you done that you want to do? Is there anything? And you've done a lot in your short 37 years here, but like, is there anything that's really just you've always wanted to do? It could be even skydiving. It could be starting a tech company. Is there anything that you're like really hoping you can achieve at some point?
I actually have not gone skydiving. I was going to but I was sick when my cousin and his wife went.
I haven't been either. I'd love to go. You should go sometime.
If I don't, I wouldn't be heartbroken. It's similar to like a threesome. I've never had a threesome. Like I'm not gonna be heartbroken if that never happens.
Threesome and go skydiving at the same time.
That would be interesting. You, I, and the instructor, perhaps.
Exactly. There you go.
I am very motivated right now about fundamentally changing mental health culture within professional wrestling. I've had a podcast through a great media company called Post Wrestling called The Wellness Policy for 2 years now. monthly we have chats with the pro wrestling community, obviously often pulling from, stories or references or whatever within that culture. But talking about human stuff. I mean, the last episode was about fatherhood, given that my co-host is a new father for the first time. And next month, we're talking about religion and spirituality. This is counterculture shit for a pro wrestling community. But that's certainly a mission that I'm on right now.
That's great. Like akin to, the NFL players who, have these terrible brain injuries and don't have the mental health support, all the way to soldiers coming back from war with terrible PTSD. Like, when you're doing violent things or at least even acting, or like, we all need therapy. I believe that. But I think it's such a taboo in like masculine cultures like those spaces.
Oh,
like
dude, I'm telling you,
people
yeah, to be self-aware, to be empathetic, to care about ourselves and to care about other people, to have the vulnerability to tell someone else that, you value them and that you love them. Like, that is some of the most badass motherfucker shit that I could think of.
Yep.